I wake up in my futon and check the time. It's 7 a.m. Yukari's still here at this time. She'll pick it up. Yeah. Wake up and we're woken up by the annoying phone ringing at like 7 a.m. It's like, who's trying to call me at 7? I'm trying to get some sleep, goddammit. Yes, hello? What'd I tell you? But considering 8 or 9 calls out of 10 are from me, I should probably get up. I sit up in my futon and grab my box of cigarettes. I put one in my mouth, then remember we have no ashtrays in the house. Maybe deciding to stop smoking in the house was a mistake after all. Oh well, I'll go have a smoke at my office. Good morning, Nissan. You got a call from Masaki-san. From Masaki? What did he want? I didn't expect it to be from him. Did something happen? Yaginuma-san from the police called the office. He wants to be called back right away. Yaginuma, huh? So something's finally happened. Something related to the case. Huh? Yukari, did you give him this number? I didn't anyway. I just forgot to. I swear. I totally forgot. Yes, when I was cleaning the office yesterday. That's right, I told you to bring him your laundry, didn't I, Nissan? Uh-oh. Sorry. Next time, well, I guess I won't be over there anytime soon. I take the telephone receiver in my hand to dial the number for the Metropolitan Police Department. The city's telephone network is automatic, but the lines inside the station are still manual exchange. I informed the operator that I'd like the 1st Investigation Division and wait a while. Hello, 1st Investigation Division. Yaginuma, it's Tokisaka. You called my office. What happened? It's the 3rd murder. It took place in a hotel in Ochinomizu. So it's finally happened. I wanted to have a suspect in mind before the 3rd murder if possible, but I suppose we deserve the slander about the negligence of the police. After all, the suspect from the 1st murder was spotted at the scene. What? The suspect from the 1st murder? Kamizono Mayus? That dolt. Who was the victim? According to the hotel register, a vacationer named Takamiya Meguri. I see. I imagine it might be her because that dolt was spotted there, but why? The idiot who was spotted there is in my office. Then, earlier, what is this about? I don't want him to cause a scene. Hurry up and arrest him. Yeah, just arrest him. It's fine, we know he's probably guilty. Of course. The phone suddenly cuts off. God damn it. The thought is directed at myself. Someone I saw just the other day has fallen victim to a murderer, but I feel nothing. My emotions are dulled, paralyzed. I'm breaking apart. Nissan, something's happened, hasn't it? Yukari says timidly. I'm going out. When did you see Masaki yesterday? From around 6:30 to 7. Has Masaki-san... There's no need to worry. You've got class, don't you? Get going. Right. I'll be off then. Yukari leaves the living room. Damn it. I sigh again. Ugh. It was completely obvious from that conversation that something happened with Masaki, wasn't it? I take the Ome Highway to the office and find it already surrounded by police cars. It's as if they're after a vicious criminal holed up inside. Though I suppose there's no helping it if people interpret it that way. Get a move on already! I hear a shout and the restrained dolt comes out of the building with Yaginuma. Tokisaka-san! What is this about? That's what I want to know. Just take him away. Yaginuma, have you told him about the victim? Well, I wouldn't want him causing a scene, though he did resist some. Don't be too rough with him. I'm certain the true culprit is someone else. I'll bet, if he really did do it, he would have fled after that phone call this morning. I watched Masaki get stuffed into a police car and taken away. God damn. I mean, I guess it makes sense. We already know he has like a relation to the victim, but that doesn't mean he was the one that did it. I mean, is this really proper police procedure? It's better that I investigate the scene alone than have that vengeful dolt along. Well, you could have just kept him at the office or something. Did you really have to arrest him? Let's go, Yaginuma. The scene's in Ochinomizu? I follow the police car Yaginuma gets into a hotel on a hill near Ochinomizu Station. There's already a cordon up around the hotel prohibiting unauthorized entrance. The autopsy should already be underway, which means Natsume-san's here. I've got business in the lobby, so please head to the scene, senpai. Yaginuma says, heading into the hotel. I haven't heard where the scene is yet, but I suppose I'll find out if I go inside. The large amount of policemen here should be guarding the room after all. I follow Yaginuma into the hotel. It's full of police officers in here as well. I ask one of the guards for the room number and climb up the stairs. Inside the room with the largest amount of policemen outside it, I find Natsume-san.
Come on in, Tokisaka-han.
The victim. Natsume-san's looking toward the closet. Ooh. A woman hangs inside it like clothes on a hanger. I say a little silent prayer and glance inside. This is definitely the woman who came by my office looking for someone. There's dried blood smeared across her half-open lips. And there's her abnormally inflated stomach.
The third case is the same as the first two. Want to check it out?
Yes. I don some gloves and say another silent prayer. I'll investigate, but I'm sure that the only evidence I'll find is inside her stomach, like the others. I need to think about why she was killed. Okay, investigation time. Well, I think first we should probably examine the face.
According to the hotel register, the victim was Takamiya Meguri-han from Toyama.
Yes, I know.
What, did Yaginuma-han already tell you?
Well, something like that. I can explain things to Natsume-san later. I shouldn't give her any ideas at this point. There's a wound on the back of her head.
Yep, it looks like she was, well, clocked with that marble clock.
This is no time for jokes, goddammit. The clock lies on the floor. The glass is broken and the hands are stopped, pointing at about 5. Guess we could take that as the time of the crime.
I'd wager the cause of death was multiple organ failure due to blood loss. The contusions on her head would have given her a concussion at best. The fatal wound was the stomach.
So he hit her to knock her out, then murdered her. He used drugs on Kamizono Mayu for Atose Mizuki.
There weren't any signs of drugs. I would wager she opened the door and wham! Got stabbed just like that.
We didn't find any other wounds on her, so that's likely. If that's the case, these murders all start in completely different ways. But whether that's significant or not, I don't think I can come to any conclusions on that now. I should look at some other places. I think the other places we should look are... Oh yeah, that's right, the arms. The corpse's arms are suspended with western belts.
They've still got price tags on them. I'd wager they were taken right from those shopping bags.
The bags have Yokohama written on them. Just like the last 2 times, the killer used things that were already on the scene. He must have a reason to take the time to hang them like this. Is it an allusion to the crucifixion of Christ after all? I have no idea what that could signify though. I think it was like, yeah, the abdomen next. I crouch down in front of the body and inspect the stomach sliced open and sewed up with thread. The method is the same as it's been up to now. However, there's clearly less viscera coming out of the body now. Maybe he's found a way to do this without making a mess.
Looks like our deceased friend was prepared on the floor over yonder. There's a puddle of blood.
Natsume-san gestures to the floor of the room. So she was killed there. There are drops of blood leading to the closet from being dragged over to it. A blood-stained blanket is on the disarrayed bed. Guess he wrapped her in this to move her.
Tell me when you're done investigating. I'll open her up then.
Sure. Okay. This is probably all I'll be able to find out from the body. Go ahead, Natsume-san.
Righto.
By Natsume-san's instructions, the body is released from the belts hanging it, set on a stretcher and lowered to the floor. Natsume-san severs the thread with scissors.
Same as always.
The thing Natsume-san takes out of the body. Of course. A clay doll covered in blood. It closely resembles the other 2 we've seen, of course. Maybe it's a little smaller. If that's the more easily fit inside the body, could it be called an improvement? It would be nice if we found some other new discovery, but I don't see anything at a glance. Please check it for fingerprints and the origin of the soil.
Don't gotta tell me. I'll send it along to forensics with the others.
Thank you.
Anyhow, boys, go ahead and haul her away.
A sheet is laid over the stretcher and the body's taken out. We're left with the smell of death and a few of the forensics guys. I didn't see a Blessed Congregation emblem. They must be unrelated after all. Takamiya Meguri from Toyama probably isn't a member of a Tokyo religious group. Do you know when she was killed?
Well, let's see. I wager more than 12 hours have passed. Did you see that broken clock?
It was stopped at 5. That would make it last evening rather than morning, but...
That's impossible, senpai.
Yaginuma enters the room.
What's that supposed to mean? We know the victim returned here last night with a man at 5:30. In other words, the clock was tampered with to conceal the actual time of the crime.
Oh, Yaginuma's onto something.
A man? All it took was one picture.
Yaginuma looks at me and smirks. Let me guess. Misaki.
Furthermore, according to the reception desk, no one saw the man leave, and the back door was unlocked.
Fleeing from the back door after the crime. Yeah, that does make him look pretty guilty, you know, to be fair. There's a high probability. Well, senpai, what's your defense? And this is the guy who was saying Masaki was innocent just a little while ago. I'll just assume he's trying to eliminate possibilities. My sister was the dolt in the office from 6:30 to 7. If we get an accurate time of death, I believe his innocence will be proven. If it takes 30 minutes to get here from Shinjuku, he must have left by 6, but if he went back to the office first, then committed the crime, then it's possible he did it if it was after 7:30. I have to admit that. We can't really say nothing until the time of death is clear. That'll take a while more. You're right. Do you know anything about how the victim and Masaki Tomoyuki were related? The victim came to my office with a request to find someone, but the two of them appeared to have already known each other. If they were already acquainted, maybe they're from the same town. That'd be West Toyama Prefecture, Tonami City, Ningyo Settlement. Pardon, Hitogata, Ningyo. As in doll, like the clay dolls in the stomachs of the bodies? No, we're just assuming they're dolls. Though if they're supposed to be fetuses, it might not be a stretch to call them dolls. Now that you mention it, Toyama is famous for his clay dolls. They ain't the kind you stick into people's stomachs, though. How are Toyama dolls different? I wager they're painted, porcelain dolls. Then something completely different. Though, it might be worthwhile to investigate the area, and the possibility that he's from that settlement. Yaginuma, are you going to question the dolt? At the very least, he's probably the last person to see the victim alive. Since we have no leads on the culprit, I'll question him. Got it. Be careful not to push him to suicide or anything. I don't care if he dies. I'd be able to conclude he was the culprit. He's been involved with 2 of the 3 victims so far, after all. And what if there's another incident after that? Natsume-san voices my thoughts. We'll continue our investigation, of course. It'd take a fool to let the real culprit get away. Why don't you go and find some stuff you can defend him with, senpai? I suppose I will. There are still things I need to investigate about him. Even if I talk to him, I doubt he'll say anything worthwhile unless I already know the truth about him. I need to figure out his real name. If I do that, I'll understand his relationship with Takamiya Meguri, and I might understand why those women were killed. Just like Yaginuma said, he's been involved with 2 out of the 3 victims. I can't imagine he's unrelated at this point. I know it's roundabout, but as long as we've got no leads on the culprit, this is all I can do. Yeah, he's probably right that he won't tell him anything unless he actually knows, unless he knows the truth about him. I leave Ochanomizu by car. I asked Natsume-san to get a hold of a few documents related to Masaki. First, his previous address, Nakota City, Nakano Ward, from his family register and certificate of residence. That, and the documents on Masaki Tomoyuki's time in the military. There should still be a list of names for whatever unit he belonged to in the 1st Demobilization Ministry restructured by the U.S. Army, now the Ministry of Health and Welfare 1st Demobilization Department. Whoever he is, first I need to figure out Masaki Tomoyuki's identity. Then there's the possibility of him being Koriya Naori. Whether or not that's his real name, it'll take a lot of work figuring that out. Guess I'll have to ask some questions wherever he's been. He may have left some clues behind. It'd be nice if I knew where he used to work, but unfortunately he hasn't disclosed that information to me. I drive down Yasukuni Street, passing under an overhead railway structure, and head toward the Ome Highway. I'm on my way to the Kuchiki Hospital in Nakano. It's the only place I can think of that I know he's frequented. I stop my car in the parking lot. A 4-door Toyopet is parked next to me. I think I've seen this car before. That's right, it's Kuchiki Fumiya's. I think he told me he bought it when he became the director to commute here. I remember thinking at the time that other doctors were driving better cars. The previous head had a Mercedes and a former psychiatrist had a Buick. Well, whatever. Maybe I should ask Fumiya since he's here. No, even though he's the director, or rather because he's the director, what he knows about individual patients is limited. From that standpoint, asking Rokushiki would be the fastest, but I doubt he'd cough up any answers. All I'll be able to do is give him Masaki's identity after figuring it out and see if he nods or not. And if that's all he'll do, I can just ask Masaki himself. Sheesh, why am I doing this instead of looking for the culprit? I enter the building and look around for someone. I mean, I could have asked him that same question when he was, looking for Toko's true identity in the, near the end of the first game. Oh, I was hoping to find someone else. Michiru walks up to me with no regard for those hopes of mine. What? Nah, it's nothing. Is Dr. Yamanouchi around? Who? Koharu-chan. Oh, yeah. Do you know where she is? Behind you. Huh? I turn around. Kohara-chan, I mean Dr. Yamanouchi, is standing there blushing for some reason. Dr. Yamanouchi, could I ask you... Yes, what is it? This is kind of embarrassing. This is really weird. Do you mind if we speak somewhere else? A tryst? Your spelling's a little off. Wait, how do I know her spelling just from talking to her? Did he just break the fourth wall? It seriously seems like he just broke the fourth wall with that. It's not a tryst. Oh well, it's nothing too serious. I might as well get it over with here. It has to do with Masaki-kun. I was just wondering if the name Kuriya Naori rang any bells. Kuriya-san? I feel like I've heard that name somewhere before. Was he a patient here in the past? Well, I have no way of checking that now, so who was he? Kuriya is my mother's maiden name. Fumiya enters our conversation. Oh, hello Fumiya-san. So it's your mother's family? Yes, the Ya is the character from Arrowhead, right? Right, then do you know a name Kuriya Naori? Naori-san is my cousin. That takes me back. I've only ever met him once, when I went to Toyama before the war. Fumiya rubs the fingers of his gloved right hand. Maybe he's cold. You haven't seen him since? I think it's more that he's remembering the time he got his hand cut. I haven't. I heard he came to Tokyo as a doctor, but unfortunately I haven't had the opportunity to meet him. You're sure he's a doctor? Yes, my father's seen him, so I'm sure. Why do you ask about him? Nothing important. I hesitate to say more. My prediction about Masaki Tomoyuki being Kuriya Naori. Yes, I was wrong. I doubt he would go to a hospital a relative of his runs. So Takemiya Meguri's request. There's still the possibility she was looking for him, but I guess Masaki himself wrote down the name of an acquaintance rather than his real name. A name that ties him to Takemiya Meguri. If they decided to pretend she was really looking for him, she'd be able to talk about him when his name came up. Nanako-san knows Naori-san very well. Nanako? She's a nurse who used to work at the Kuriya clinic, Naori-san's old home. She moved to Tokyo with one of her parents and works here now. Is she here now? Sawashiro-san? She worked the night shift starting at 8 last night, so she went home this morning at 8. Was Sawashiro-san in charge of Masaki? No, she mainly works in pediatrics, so I don't think they would have seen each other much. She's also part-time. So Sawashiro Nanako, who knows Kuriya Naori, wouldn't have met Masaki Tomoyuki. There's still the chance that they're the same person then. Fumiya-san, was Kuriya-san's residence in Hitogata settlement in Toyama by chance? Yes, that's right. Fumiya nods. Kuriya Naori and Takemiya Meguri are from the same settlement. There's the link. There's their link, so who's Masaki Tomoyuki? I'm nearly certain that he's also from the Hitogata settlement. Is he Kuriya Naori or someone else entirely? I'd like to talk to this Sawashiro-san. I think she'll be at work tomorrow. Tomorrow. Guess she'll be my last resort if I don't find any clues before then. One last thing. Fumiya-san, have you met Masaki Tomoyuki? He was a patient here. No, I don't think I have. I think I would notice if he were Naori-san, though. Right. I found no definitive leads about his identity. I guess I'll think about it after I get a hold of his family register and such. Thank you. I'll come again tomorrow. Very well. I'll let Sawashiro-san know. When I leave the building, it's almost twilight. If I head back to Sakuradama now, it'll be dark when I get there. I get into my car, hoping the documents have been procured. Natsume-san's inside the illuminated building. You're late, Tokisaka-han. I'm sorry, Natsume-san. I didn't think you'd be here. Anyhow, the autopsy's done, so I've got a few other things too. Then, please give me the autopsy results first. Sure thing. First is the time of death. It was around 8 last night. I'd estimate it was in the ballpark of a half an hour before to a half an hour later. If it was around 8, there's still a tiny chance Masaki could have done it. How long do you think it would have taken to arrange the body afterward? Let's see, since they're getting used to it, I think 30 minutes would be sufficient, don't you? I can't guarantee the arranging started after she was fully dead, though. Anywhere from a half hour before to a half hour after 8 last night. That's when the crime was committed and the body was arranged and displayed. Forensics also found evidence that the shower and the bathroom had been used. The killer must have washed off the blood and smell that had got on him. And I'm guessing that's all you found out, since you'd tell me if that led to some noteworthy clue. Bingo. All we got was a blood reaction. We didn't find a single hair in there. All we got out of it was that the guy's careful and neat. Natsume-san counts on her fingers. If they took a shower, they would have left the room even later. I would guess they left at around 9. The suspicions against Masaki can't be cleared by the killer's actions after the crime, of course. Natsume-san, do you have the other things I asked you for?
Yep, let's see. It was the government paperwork, yeah?
I accept the envelope and take the documents out of it. It's his certificate of residence in Nakano Ward and his family register. Nakano Ward, Nogata City, 1 Shomei, Masaki Tomoyuki. April 1948 is when he moved in. His previous address isn't written here. His family register is the same. Masaki Tomoyuki's permanent home. Nakano Ward, Nogata City, 1 Shomei. The same as his current address. He must have made a new register after the war. That would explain why there's no records from before then. That's exactly what I was looking for, of course.
This is the unit list from the Ministry of Health and Welfare. There's a tag on the section Masaki Hansen.
Let me see it. I take the list from Natsume-san and look through it. Masaki Tomoyuki, from Nagano Prefecture, Hisogata District, Osa Village, died of disease on Lawson. So he's deceased.
Well, it happens a lot. People become someone who died at war and live as them.
That explains things. Knowing about Masaki Tomoyuki's death on the battlefield, he created a new register for him after the war and lived in a faraway city where he wouldn't meet the real Masaki Tomoyuki's acquaintances. It's not impossible. In fact, like Natsume-san said, it's not an uncommon occurrence.
He could also have pretended to die and be living somewhere else now.
I can't deny that, but I still think he's someone else. Takemiya Meguri came to find someone. Was it him? If she was searching for Masaki Tomoyuki, then there would have been no need for him to write Kuri Inaori's name down. I looked down to the list of names again. If Kuri Inaori's on the list, I think I could say that that's him, but I looked through the names and addresses. They're mostly people from Nagano Prefecture. The army conscripts by region, so there are a lot of people from the same place in the same unit, but a few of them are from different regions. Among them, there's a person from the Hitogata settlement. It's not Kuri Inaori. The name is... Ooh, what is it? I wonder what that name could be. Don't leave me in suspense. Day breaks and the adult is taken from his holding cell back into the interrogation room. I look on from a curtain viewing window in an adjacent room. Let's review from the top again, Yaginuma says to Masaki, looking down at him where he sits in a chair. Is it true that you visited that hotel the day before yesterday? Yes. Do you remember the time? I arrived at the hotel at about 5:30 and left before 6. The adult answers indifferently as if they've had this exchange several times before. We have eyewitness testimony that you arrived at the hotel with the victim at 5:30, but no one saw you leave. That's because I left from the back. Why go to the trouble? Yaginuma presses him for an answer. The adult doesn't say. He's hiding something. There's no crime in keeping silent. Actually, it's perfectly within his rights, even though we'd be able to prove that he's not the culprit if he just told us. If he would go this far to keep silent. I can think of a few reasons why, from what I've learned so far. I'll just have to explain everything later. Here's why I think you left from the back door, to unlock it so that you'd be able to get back in later. That wasn't my intent. The adult shakes his head. In any case, you returned for the time being to your lodging in the Shinjuku Detective Agency. Tell me what route you used and when you arrived. I left the hotel from the back and went to Sudobashi Station, where I boarded the train. I arrived at the office in Shinjuku 30 minutes later. There you met Miss Tokisaka Yukari and conversed with her. And when did she leave? Before 7. She said she'd be stopping at the Nikko by the station. You'd have time to return to Ochanomizu in that case, wouldn't you? I suppose. But I didn't kill Takemiya Meguri, yes? Right. The moron hangs his head. The suspicions against him haven't been cleared. There's no way to clear them. Not as long as he's hiding things like this. The reason he left the hotel from the back. It's true that he could have been unlocking the door to come back later as Yaginuma suggested, but I can think of another reason. That is, the possibility that he saw the true culprit. No, not necessarily the true culprit. For instance, if he saw an acquaintance, someone who knew the real him, in the lobby, he could have run out the back door in order to avoid being discovered. If I assumed that the person was there to visit Takemiya Meguri, it would be a shared acquaintance of theirs. I'm almost certain that Takemiya Meguri and the person calling himself Masaki are from the same town. Then the one he saw was most likely from there as well. Of course, none of this is solid evidence if it's all a big pile of hypotheses. What I really need to do right now is figure out who this dolt calling himself Masaki Tomoyuki is. I figured out why he started using a fake name by talking to Rokushiki. Though this is Rokoshiki we're talking about, there is the possibility he was deliberately confusing me. But there was weight in a few words he said to me. Is the fact that I trust him so easily on this evidence that he's influencing me? I back away from the window and open the door to the interrogation room. Hey, moron. Tokisaka-san. Puffy eyes look up at me. Guess he hasn't been sleeping well. Our investigation isn't getting anywhere because of all the shit you're hiding, you dolt. You know, I can't really blame him for being angry at, Masaki here. You know, he is hiding a lot, and it is definitely hindering the investigation because a lot of what he knows would definitely help the investigation. That's not what I'm... So he's still playing innocent. Even though he has to know it won't last. It'd be faster for me to just tell him what I figured out. Now, this guy who calls himself Masaki Tomiyuki's real name is... Yeah, we already know. Hinagami Ayato. The dolt gasped for a second there. Masaki Tomiyuki was killed in action on the Southern Front. The only person in his unit from the Hitogata settlement was Hinagami Ayato. Well, that was pretty easy to figure out then. I do seem to recall a guy like that. So he boasts. Dude, come on, that person with your name is dead. You can't hide that. You can't keep hiding. You can't keep hiding the fact that you're Hinagami Ayato. Casualty lists are annoying. There are a lot of them that don't light up with family registers. Usually the bereaved family will take care of it, but if the deceased has no relatives, it stays as is. I place the list of names on the desk. Of course, sometimes they'll come back, having not actually died, but I doubt that's the case for Masaki Tomiyuki. Why's that? You know, don't you? He died of illness. I don't know if it was dysentery or malaria, but it wasn't something he suddenly got over and come right on back from. It's not the same as someone who goes missing in a war zone and is treated as if they were killed in action. And you're from the same village as Takamiya Maguri. This is the only logical conclusion from the evidence we've found so far. Masaki, Hinagami Ayato, doesn't respond. It's a little reckless, but if I want this guy to open his mouth, I'm gonna have to shine some light on the obsession he's carrying. I'm guessing the reason you changed your name was fairly simple. You've had the name for almost 10 years since the war. My theory is that you've committed some crime and are on the run. He still doesn't budge. Jeez, I was hoping I could get away with not saying this stuff in the police station, but I guess I've got to tell him what I figured out with Rokoshiki. Masaki, no, Hinagami Ayato, your crime was... desertion, murder, bankruptcy... How the hell are we supposed to know that? Okay, I guess it must have been murder. The simplest explanation would be murder. After the war, you killed someone, somewhere, and now you're hiding out in Tokyo now. Something along those lines. Do you have proof of that? Not at all. I simply guessed after talking to your psychiatrist. He may be an inexcusable criminal, but he's still brilliant. As irritating as that is to admit. I would guess you committed murder in your hometown. You probably wouldn't have many other places to go just after the war. Stabbing in the dark much, senpai. We can't arrest him on that. I'm not doing this so we can arrest him. I just wanted to know the truth. Alright, Masaki? No, Hinagami Ayato-kun? I have nothing to tell you. If we call in a witness, will you talk? Koriya Naori, or the nurse Sawashiro Nanako, or Hinagami Karen? That's the same surname as you. When did you come across all those names? A lot of it is the product of coincidence. He gives a big sigh. Where do I begin? Well, how about with what you're hiding? Of course, I won't make you tell us everything. I've only been with you for a short while, Tokisaka-san, but you've got a really nasty personality, don't you? I'm aware of that. I wouldn't make a very good detective otherwise. I doubt I'd be very good at it then. If you're trying to say you've got a good personality, I think you're plenty qualified. Maybe so. I'll talk. I'm starting to get tired of running away. Masaki, Hinagami Ayato, looks up at the ceiling, closes his eyes, and takes a deep breath. Oh, time for us to hear the story of what happened when Ayato returned to his village after the war. Fourth Terrace, the Slothful. Satsuki was dead. There was a police investigation in the settlement for a little while, but I never learned anything. The investigation ended with everything still in the dark, and Satsuki was buried somewhere in Kakarahina. I wasn't even allowed to visit her grave. I wasted my time, unable to motivate myself to do anything with my life. Then the war started. I was the eldest son and had no military obligation, but I enlisted right away. It wasn't out of any respectable reason, like for my country. I was simply looking for a place to die. After training, I was immediately sent over to the mainland. After that, I wandered from Malay to Java to Sumatra. What I learned there was that people die very easily, by tiny bullets or simple traps, or even being bitten by a mosquito or a centipede. I saw people marching alongside me have their heads burst open like pomegranates. I abandoned people who'd been shot in the leg and couldn't move. There was no simple platitudes there. You wouldn't survive if you met an enemy and couldn't kill them on the spot, and I held a weapon that killed people easily. My senses were completely numb. I got used to death. I got used to killing. I thought I would get used to the concept of Satsuki's death at some point too, but she appeared in my dreams when I slept. Every night, Satsuki was in my dreams, dead. Dead in every way possible. The corpses I saw on the battlefield all came back to me as Satsuki. I woke up every day covered in corpses of Satsuki. One night when I was on sentry duty in the Philippines, I asked the man next to me if he dreamed. He was a few years older than me, and named Masaki. He said the enemy soldiers he killed appeared in his dreams too, but he laughed, saying they didn't show up on nights when he'd eaten his fill. There weren't many provisions deep in the jungle with us, and the supply lines were often cut off. Even before opening hostilities, many of my comrades starved to death. I talked to him often about the country in Nagano. I grew up in the country too, so we had a lot in common. But he was unlike me in that he had no relatives. He grew ill and collapsed on the front as well. He was ravaged by high fevers from malaria, and we had no medicine. There was no way for him to recover in his state of malnutrition. He was buried there, with the other casualties. He left nothing behind to give anyone, and had no one to give anything to. The new year came, and the U.S. forces landed on the island. We resisted, terrified of their bombardments and tanks. They bulldozed paths deep into the mountains and invaded. We starving soldiers had no way to resist them. We collapsed one by one, and our forces dwindled before my eyes. I realized that I was the only member of the unit left alive. I was taken in by another unit, and the fighting continued, until the war finally ended. I was lucky to be relatively close to the main force when the ceasefire order was handed down. I went back home without having to waste my life dying after the war was already over. That's right, I thought I was lucky to have survived, even though I had lost my will to live after Satsuki's death and had been searching for a place to die. I realized that on the train back to Toyama, I was returning to my hometown with no doubts in my mind. I believed it was Satsuki who kept me alive. I returned to the Hitogata settlement to take revenge for Satsuki. As I gazed at the nostalgic scenery of Omotehina, I decided to find Satsuki's killer. At the station at the front of the mountain, he got into a wood gas bus that took him to the entrance of the settlement. Aito was the only passenger. His familiar hometown was covered in a blanket of snow. It looked the same as that winter. Toyama City, where he'd stopped on his journey, was in a terrible state, a burnt field after air raids. Nothing had changed here. It was as if there had been no war at all. Aito-sama? It was a familiar voice, one he hadn't heard in a long time. Yuka-san. Welcome home, Aito-sama. Wow, she looks almost exactly the same. Yuka bowed her head, tears in her voice. I'm home. Yuka looked almost no different than she had when he'd left. Yeah, she really doesn't. It made him realize all the more how closed off the settlement was. The young miss is waiting this way. Allow me to take your luggage. Yuka took the dirty knapsack Aito was carrying and entered the branch office ahead of him. Before the wood stove on the dirt floor of the town hall branch office, there sat Karen, warming herself in a chair. Karen stood up when she saw Aito. Ni-sama? I'm back, Karen. You've grown. Karen clung to Aito, racked with sobs. Ni-sama, I'm so glad you're safe. Karen gripped his dirty uniform, burying her face in his chest and crying. He couldn't bring himself to tell her she'd gotten herself dirty. He was just surprised that there was someone this happy to see him return alive. I'm surprised you're back so soon. There are still folks on the mainland who can't get back yet, right? Saizo from the branch office said. I was just lucky. But for the only one here who went off to war to come back, Hina-sama must have protected you. How convenient, when it was usually feared as a vengeful god. It wasn't thanks to Hina-sama that Aito survived. He had just been lucky. Let's go home, Ni-sama. Yeah. I'll head back first and prepare a bath for you. Yuka bowed and left the branch office. Let's go too. I know you're tired, but it's just a little bit further. Yeah. With those standard responses, Aito left the building with Karen escorting him. Karen talked a lot while they walked. About how their father, Shizuru, hadn't been home much since the war ended because he was busy arranging medical supplies. About how Naori was attending a university in Tokyo. About how Mia and Kensei's daughter had grown. About how Karen would be working for Hinagami Pharmaceuticals too come spring. Except for a few details, the settlement remained the same as ever. All the changes were minor ones. Aito had only been gone for a few years while he was a soldier. But it was as if it had never happened. He remembered Satsuki's death as if it had happened only a few days ago. His feet stopped. They were in front of the stone steps leading up to the Shigusa shrine. Aito stood still there for a little while, feeling as though Satsuki was about to appear at any moment. Nisama? Karen stared at Aito's face. No, it's nothing. Satsuki wouldn't appear again, and if she died, it would be as a spirit. That's just all kinds of depressing. I've returned. He sat on the floor, turned to the seat of honor, and bowed his head. Good work, his grandfather's voice. With that one utterance, Hideyomi stood up and left the living room. He'd always been like that. He would never lose the dignity he held as the strict head of the household. In his place, Aito's grandmother Mariko stepped out. Aito-san, please get changed and relax. The bath should be ready soon. Understood. He stood up and bowed. His movements wouldn't have been so respectful once. But after years of army life and having manners toward his superior officers drilled into him, he couldn't help interacting formally with his grandmother as if she were a stranger. Though that might have been for the best. Nisama, this way. Karen beckoned him and Aito followed her to his room. Nothing had changed here either. It was the same as it had been when he left years ago. Take off your clothes, I'll wash them. No, throw them away. I'd been wearing them so long it wouldn't even be worth washing them. The smell of blood and dirt would never come off them no matter how much they were washed. He was sure of that. Very well. Karen set down his change of clothes and stepped behind him. Unbuttoning him, Karen held his collar and stripped off his shirt. Are you alright? Karen gasped when she saw Aito's body covered in filthy bandages. Nisama, what is this? Wounds, as you can see. Wounds he'd received on the battlefield. He didn't take any of the enemy's bullets, but insects in the jungle, sharpened branches, fetid water. They were traces of the constant abuse his body had taken. Do they hurt? Maybe I'm just numb now. They don't really hurt. Maybe you should go to the hospital before you take a bath. You're probably right. I'd get the tub dirty if I went in now. That's not what I'm worried about. Karen shook her head. He hadn't received any proper treatment on the battlefield. It was probably a miracle that he managed to avoid infections with diseases or lose any of his limbs, though that was all just because he'd been lucky as well. First, change into these, then we'll go to the Courier clinic. Sure. He put his underclothes on over the dirty bandages, then donned a jacket. His new clothes had an extremely strange smell. No, it was his old clothes that smelled strange. He was just bewildered at the lack of blood and dirt and sweat he smelled on his new clothes. Aito went to the Courier clinic after he'd changed. He left Karen at home even though she wanted to come. He knew she was worried about him, but he had no idea how long his treatment would take. He doubted it would be completed today. He knocked on the door. Yes, what is... Nanako emerged, losing her words when she saw Aito's face. Aito-kun? Hello. He bowed his head. I'm so glad you're back. I'm ashamed to have returned. Don't be. Oh, that's right. Now Chen's gone off to a university in Tokyo. Nanako looks exactly the same too, like she hasn't gotten any older. Yes, I heard. Is the director in? He is. Are you hurt? Well... I'm sorry. Come inside and wait. Excuse me. Oh, you're alive. Splendid, splendid. The director, so, clapped Aito on the shoulder and grinned, satisfied. I'm sorry, but could you treat my wounds? I don't mind if you just disinfect them. I suppose we should. Let's have a look. Aito undressed as instructed. Doesn't look like things were very hygienic. Your skin is festering all over. Does it hurt? Not much, but there are times when it's unbearably itchy. You don't have malaria, right? Though we should take precautions against disease. Nanako-kun, let's start with disinfecting. Understood. Lie down there. Aito lay face down on the bed as he was told. This is gonna sting, but just bear with it. Of course. You've sure got a lot of grime on you. Did they not have baths at the war? I did soak in some pools of water in the forest now and then. It might be fastest to scrub this off with a brush. I'm ready, Doctor.
Alright, let's start then. Wipe off the parts of him that aren't festering with a hot towel.
Understood.
A towel was pressed to his neck. The heat of it soaked into him. Filth fell off of him. The skin that appeared underneath it was sensitive to the heat. This was the sensation he had lost. Pain. Let's begin then. There was a cold sensation on his back. It was similar to the numbness he was feeling all over. It was hot. It was cold but hot. Icy hot. You're a man, aren't you? Bear with it. He grasped the edge. He grasped the edge of the bed and endured the pain. I think he's gonna have to come back a few times before this gets any better.
You're right. It'll take time for the skin to grow back in some places.
There was no problem with that. He knew it wouldn't heal in a day. The problem was, you won't be able to bathe for a while. You'll have to wipe down with a washcloth. I thought so. Feeling sorry for Yuka after she'd drawn a bath for him, Ayato entrusted himself to the hands of So and Nanako. Alright, I'll leave the rest to you. So left the director's office.
Everything's the same here as it was before the war. I suppose so.
Nanako nodded at Ayato's words.
It's as though just here in these mountains there was no war at all. You're the only one who knows what it's like on the outside, Ayato-kun.
What about Nao-chan?
Nao-chan was in medical training, so he would have been drafted last. He probably only knows about Tokyo.
Tokyo was bombed too.
So was Toyama, apparently. The war came this close, and there should have been people killed nearby too. But nothing's changed here.
The only thing that had changed was him, Ayato muttered to himself. Was there ever any new developments with that incident? He decided to ask.
That incident?
When Satsuki was killed.
No, nothing. You know the police left right after the war started, right?
Yes. It was the reason for Ayato's loss of hope and decision to go to war.
But that detective, Inui-san, was it? He was the one who still came to investigate a few times during the war.
I see. So the culprit was never found.
Everyone said it was Hina-sama's curse, so there's no point in investigating since there isn't a culprit.
So Satsuki died because of the curse.
It's not as if anyone concluded that it was the curse, but...
Nanako said ambiguously. Who was the first person to declare that it was the curse? It would probably be impossible to find such a thing out. It was probably a rumor that spontaneously developed among the people in the settlement. Applying some plaster to his back, she wrapped bandages around him.
That's all for today. Don't take a bath for a while, just wipe yourself down with a washcloth.
I understand. He sat up and put on his clothes. Well, if you'll excuse me then. He headed outside from the Kuriya clinic. His body felt light, but it hurt when he moved because his clothes rubbed against his skin. It didn't look like he'd be able to get any more investigating in today. He probably needed to heal a little more before he could do anything. He had time, unfortunately. Ayato had no goal at this point other than finding Satsuki's killer. He stopped when he reached his house. Just in front of the entrance, under the eaves, was...
Oh!
A woman ran up to him. Guriko? Before he could finish.
Rihito!
Meguri dived at Ayato, knocking him over onto the snow. Landing on his just disinfected back, he grimaced with pain.
I'm sorry.
Meguri got up and extended her hand to Ayato.
Welcome back, Rihito.
I'm home. The two stood facing each other, covered in snow.
I just heard from Ohina that you were back, so I was waiting here.
You should have waited inside. Karen's in there, right?
Yeah, but I didn't want to intrude, and I would have been a bother if I'd gone to the hospital.
There's no need to be so reserved all of a sudden, is there?
Oh, wait.
Meguri stopped Ayato as he was about to head inside. What is it?
It's late, so I've got to get home. I'm glad you came back.
Thanks.
Well, see you.
Meguri walked past Ayato. Their hands brushed.
Oh, Ayato-sama? Is something the matter?
Yuka came out from the entrance. No, it's nothing.
The bath is ready, so please take a nice long soak after your travels.
Actually, Feeling sorry for putting Yuka through the trouble, Ayato explained that he couldn't submerge himself in the bath now.
I see. Then I'll bring some warm water to your room so you can clean yourself.
Thanks. Man, you just gotta feel fucking terrible for Ayato, like he's just been through some shit. After dinner with his grandparents, Ayato returned to his room. The dinner table had been stifling as always. Neither of his grandparents had asked Ayato any questions.
Not about the war, about his injuries, or anything up until that point. Nothing. Not even why he'd enlisted as a soldier. Maybe they just weren't interested in Ayato. He had no idea what went through his grandparents' heads. He lay on the tatami and rolled around. It had been a while since he'd been anywhere with tatami. His body felt heavy. He felt as if he could drift off to sleep at any moment. He wanted to at least sleep inside a futon. Otherwise, he was sure he'd catch a cold.
Nii-sama, I'm coming in.
The door opened and Karen entered.
Are you alright, Nii-sama?
Yeah, I'm fine. He sat up. Need something?
No, nothing like that.
Karen sat down in front of him.
I wanted to talk a little.
I don't mind, but I don't have anything interesting to say. Actually, I'd rather hear about here.
That's fine.
Karen corrected her posture. So, what's changed since I left?
Not much. Everything's pretty much the same.
What about the festivals?
They're the same as always. Oh, but Saya-san's back to doing the dance. Apparently the Miko passed away.
Sachin really was the Miko, wasn't she? If she wasn't, it wouldn't have made any sense for the Miko to have disappeared.
Maybe so, but no one at the shrine has said anything to that effect.
That's because no one's supposed to know who the Miko is. They couldn't just say that their guest from outside was the Miko. But I'm wondering how Satsuki could be the Miko if she was there with you the whole time. Unless there really is two of her somehow, like, which I would think is impossible. Maybe she has a twin sister we don't know about.
I wonder where Sachin came from anyway.
I have no idea. The police never figured anything out, did they?
I doubt it. The detective who was investigating it for so long hasn't been here lately either.
I'm gonna go to the police station tomorrow. Takayama-san's still there, right?
Yes, there and bored as always.
It's good that he's bored. It means nothing bad's happening. That's why the incidents surrounding Hina-sama were all the more conspicuous. Tomorrow he would go to the police station and ask about the investigation. He'd start his search for Satsuki's murderer there. That was the whole reason Ayato had come back here after all. Well, hopefully he'll actually find something. Probably that was what led up to Ayato murdering somebody. I guess he murdered somebody who he thought was the culprit. The next day, Ayato walked down the roads of the settlement alone. Last night's snow had covered the fields in pure white. The thatch-roofed houses looked like little white mountains, too. It was scenery he was all too used to seeing. But scenery from several years ago. The cold this morning, too, was something he hadn't felt in years. He headed for the police station, crunching the needle ice that had formed beneath the snow as he went. Good morning. Entering the station with a greeting, he found Officer Takayama warming his hands by the stove. And he looks the same, too.
Huh? Oh, if it isn't the eldest Inagami-san. Back from the war?
Yes, I just got back yesterday.
I see. Have a seat.
Takayama offered him a chair. Thank you.
Want something to drink? All I've got is tea, though.
No, don't worry about it. Takayama eyed Ayato strangely after his response. What is it?
Nothing. Were you always that polite?
That's what happens when you're in the army for 5 years.
Makes sense. Has it really been that long?
He poured water from a kettle into a small teapot. Did anything unusual happen here while I was gone? Ayato asked, accepting a teacup.
Nope, nothing. It was perfectly peaceful.
Were there any developments on that case?
That case?
That one. Takayama folded his arms in thought.
Inui-san stayed behind after all the other investigators left, but he was called back by headquarters right away too. Didn't look like he'd found anything either.
Do you have the files from back then?
I think I do, but I can't go and show them to a civilian. But I discovered the body, and I want to know why she was killed.
Well, yeah, but... Wavering about it, Takayama kept glancing at a nearby cabinet. That was almost definitely where the files were. Ayato wasn't planning on stealing a glance at them, of course. Please, Takayama-san, I won't cause you any trouble.
Don't tell anybody about this, okay?
Takayama stood up and headed toward the exact cabinet Ayato thought he would. You were part of the investigation too, right, Takayama-san?
Yeah, but nothing pointed to the culprit ever surfaced.
Here, this is it. Takayama returned with a bundle of documents.
These are the witness testimonies. The questions we asked you should be in here too.
Who were the other witnesses?
She was discovered on the path to the shrine, so we thought there would be more witnesses, but apparently no one at the shrine saw anything.
He had thought that would be the case.
We weren't able to find any notable footprints because of the snow that morning.
Of course, by the time we were able to look for footprints, the place was already covered in them. If someone went to the shrine that morning, there's no way they wouldn't have noticed, not in a place like that. We looked into that too, but nobody went to the shrine that morning, and the Shigusas didn't head down from the shrine either. He flipped through the documents as he listened to Takayama. Now, looks like that creepy storehouse. There was an autopsy report. The cause of death was written as suffocation. Inui-san said he believed she was strangled to death and her limbs were severed afterward. Severed limbs? He remembered Satsuki's body hanging from the torii. Her sleeves and skirt had been flapping in the wind. Why would they do that? You'd have to ask the culprit. It's fundamentally different from the curse after all. Fundamentally different? Isn't it? None of the curse victims have had their limbs severed up until now. And, no, that's not important. Takayama waved his hand to change the subject. Anyway, this isn't the curse. It's an actual murder case with a culprit. Isn't the curse a case with a culprit too? Well, I think so, but... The older Takayama gazed forlornly out of the police station. It's just not like that here. You're in the Hinagami family, so you understand that, right? Hinasama's curse was outside the realm of human knowledge. That was common sense in this settlement. He'd heard it countless times since he was young. But even so, what could do such a thing other than people? Well, Hinasama, right? I'm someone who's been outside of the village, but most people here believe that with all their hearts. But the police investigated it properly, right? They did, but that's it. What do you mean? The people in charge of the prefectural police ordered them to stop their investigation. I'm just a grunt, so I don't know the specifics, but they took all their files away with them. Were they under some kind of pressure? He couldn't imagine anyone in such a rustic mountain village having that kind of authority, but... Was it my family? Hinagami Pharmaceuticals. Because it had expanded out to Tokyo, or... Beats me. All I can do is obey what my superiors tell me. Takayama shook his head powerlessly. So please, don't go back and try to find out. If Aito went home and asked questions, Hideyomi would definitely find out where he'd gotten those ideas. It would be easy to figure out that Takayama had talked, and even Aito had no idea what would happen after that. He could tell it would cause Takayama trouble though, and Aito wasn't immature enough to try it anyway. He knew in his bones that the way clever adults handled problems was to look the other way. But you weren't ordered to stop investigating Satsuki's murder, right? Nope, we were, but Inui-san kept looking into it, since it was different than the previous curse incidents, but he was dragged back by HQ. Takayama picked up the documents. Leaving this behind was probably all Inui-san could manage, but even if the truth came to light, I doubt we could prosecute anyone. No one could be judged in court for the crime. I don't care, I just want to know what happened back then. Even Aito had no idea what he would do when he found out. He flipped through the documents. This data is on the victim, on Satsuki. We had far too little information on the victim. We knew she was living at the Shigusa Shrine and investigated her room, but Takayama took a photo out of the documents. The Shigusas were housing her in their storehouse. They said she was a guest, but they might have adopted her from somewhere. Aito gazed at the photo. He couldn't make much out of the black and white photograph. There must not have been much light in the location. This was where Satsuki had lived? There was nothing in the room. It must have been cold in the winter. Now that he thought about it, he realized that he was always told not to approach the storehouse behind the shrine office when he played at the shrine. Had she been there even back then? You went inside the storeroom, Takayama-san. I took the picture. I remember a little about it, but... Did you figure anything out about it? If I did, I would have reported it a long time ago. Here's where it describes the room. Takayama flipped through the documents. It was used for storage until Satsuki came. Then it was used as her room. That was unusual. Satsuki came at the end of the year before she was killed, just a few months before the incident. He had been told not to go near the storehouse much earlier than then. And... It's hard to tell from the picture, but it looks very clean. There's nothing in it. A floor, walls, and a chest in the corner. It looked like everything was cleaned up. They said that the family cleaned it up, but we didn't investigate the storeroom until months after the case. It makes sense for it to have been cleaned up by then. I suppose you're right. Some time had passed. Inui-san was being censured for acting on his own and wasn't able to be present, and the storehouse was empty, so the investigation ended right away. I see. Then he might find something if he went. The door to the outside opened. Officer, I have some mandarins from my grandma. A woman in a kimono. Oh. Young mistress. Rihito? The young mistress, Futami Yu, blinked several times. Oh. Welcome back. Yeah, I'm back. It was an awkward exchange. You're not surprised? I'm plenty surprised, but I heard from Ohina that you were back. You left the mandarin she was carrying on the desk. Why are you at the police station? I'm investigating that case. Sachin's case. Sachin's? But that... You glanced at Takayama. He said he wanted to look into it, and citizens have to listen to what army men say, right? Please don't talk like that. I don't think of myself as an army man. He was simply a youngster trying to dig up the past. But that was before the war, wasn't it? I don't think there's anything left now to investigate. There's the data the prefectural police left behind, but honestly, I doubt you'll find any new information here. Takayama collected all the data together. Why not? Because if you could, Inoue-san would have a long time ago, though Inoue-san did have to leave before he could do any serious investigating. Takayama put all the files in a large envelope and returned it to the cabinet. You can't take these out of here, okay? Though I can show them to you here. I understand. I don't want a disciplinary dismissal either, but in exchange, I'll close my eyes to whatever you do, as long as it's not a felony. Thank you. He had no idea how much Takayama's approval was worth. He knew the Hinogamis and Shiguses were more powerful here in the settlement. That much was clear from the fact that the incidents of the curse were being buried. I'll try going to the shrine, and don't worry, I won't tell them that you said anything to me, Takayama-san. Appreciate it. It would probably have been easy for them to guess that he did even if Aito didn't tell them, but he kept quiet about that. Well, I guess Aito is going to be doing some investigating. Time to go to the shrine. Do the job that I knew he couldn't do. Aito left the police station, you following behind him. Rihito. Yeah? You grew. You used to be the same height as me. Well, it's been a long time. My weight hasn't changed, though. Actually, I may weigh even less than before. He felt like he'd lost all the muscles he'd put on training down in the jungles on the south. Was it hard out there? I didn't have any time to think about whether or not it was hard. He would have died if he let himself think about that. Still training to take over the inn, young mistress? Yes, it's not as if we ever have any customers, but my grandma's as passionate about it as ever. You smiled bitterly. You don't know anything, do you, young mistress? About the murder, that is. No, just that the policeman staying at the inn left right away. Everyone was relieved to go, since there's nothing to do out here. Anyone would feel depressed out here, even if they just come to do their jobs. Oh, but just one. Just the detective Inoue-san stayed behind until the end. He was all worked up, saying he wouldn't go back until he'd found the culprit. Yet he did go back, huh? He did, but... Oh, but Inoue-san should be coming back soon. He's reserved a room. When is he coming? I don't remember, but soon, I think. I see. The middle-aged detective investigating the case. If Aito spoke to him, he might be able to figure out something new. Well, I should get home. Yeah, see you around. You left down a path that led to the Futami Inn. Well then, Aito headed off toward the deeper parts of the settlement. Time to go back to the shrine. He saw the stone steps leading up to the shrine behind the torii. He hadn't been up these steps since that incident either. In between the incident and his going off to war, he just couldn't bring himself to. But today, he set foot on the stone steps. He had to ask about Satsuki. That was why Aito had returned. The path to the shrine stretched out after he finished climbing the steps. He came to the torii and stopped. This was where Satsuki was that day. Of course, there were no traces of her left here. He put his hands together in front of the torii. Who was she, and why did she have to be killed? Finding that out would be the greatest memorial service he could give her. He hadn't been to the Shigusa shrine in a long time. Nothing had changed about it. It was dead silent as usual. Kensei was sweeping the ground in front of the hall of worship. It's been a while, Kensei-san. Well, hello. Kensei stopped sweeping. You're back, Aito-kun. Yes, I just got back yesterday. I'm glad you've returned in one piece. Will you be here for a while? Yes, I don't have any plans for the immediate future. That's right. He hadn't decided at all what he would do after investigating Satsuki's death. I see. You should take your time resting and healing. Will do, but first, there's something I'd like to ask you. What is it? It's about Satsuki. About Satsuki? Kensei's expression became hesitant. Yes, I'm trying to find out why she was killed. Her, huh? Kensei sighed. Why are you investigating her now? That's over and done with. It's not over in my mind. We still don't know the culprit or anything else. I suppose. You might be right, but here, it's something that's in the past. Kensei shook his head. Who was Satsuki? She was a guest from outside. Where's outside? I'll look into it, so please tell me. Aito pressed, bluffing. The truth is, I'm not really sure myself, Kensei said with a sigh. We were entrusted with her by a friend of my father-in-law's, of Yoshimitsu-san. Aito once heard that Kensei had married into the Shigusa family. Then should I ask the chief priest? I doubt he would answer, though. Kensei laughed pathetically. You can't exactly sit in front of your grandfather and ask questions like that, can you? He might have been able to now. Aito thought for a moment, but changed his mind right away. There was no way he could. And even if he could, he couldn't imagine his grandfather giving any sort of answer. The power of the adults was absolute. Never mind Aito's age group, the generation above him probably found it even harder to disobey their elders. That power was probably what had halted the police investigations, and the people wielding the brunt of that power were Shigusa Yoshimitsu and Hinagami Hideyomi. There was a significant chance they hid all sorts of inconvenient truths, but it would be near impossible to expose such a thing. Apparently the family we took Satsuki-san in from died long ago. The word seemed to imply that if he investigated them, he wouldn't find anything. I don't suppose you'd tell me where they were from. I'm sorry. Kensei-san. Saya emerged from the shrine office. Oh, if it isn't Mr. Hinagami. It's been a while. He bowed to Saya. So you've come back from the war. I'm glad you're safe. Thank you. Kensei-san, my sister needs you. Mia, more trouble with Yayoi? I'll see you again then, Aito-kun. Kensei walked off into the shrine office. Did you need something? No, I've got what I was here for. Aito bowed his head and left the shrine. Well, that got us almost nothing. Well, actually, it got us nothing at all. Good job investigating, Aito. We found nothing. Aito was sprawled out on his futon that night. Alright, I'm going to wipe your back. Yuka wiped Aito's bandaged back with a wet washcloth. Make sure not to scrape it. Of course. She pressed the washcloth to his back, wiping his suppurated skin. Phew. The heat was comfortable. There was pain too, of course, but it wasn't unbearable. Should I wipe the medicine away too? They said it would be fine so long as it's clean. He answered, feeling half awake thanks to the pleasant sensation. Very well. I'll continue then. She used several washcloths to wipe down Aito's back. Aito went over the day's exploits in a daze as he left his back to Yuka. There was one thing he hadn't asked at the shrine. It was about the Miko. Apparently the Miko hadn't danced at the festival since that incident. That gave a sense of realism to his theory that Satsuki had been the Miko. But during that last festival, when the Miko was dancing, Aito had been with Satsuki. The Miko on the stage, however, was wearing a mask and he had been unable to see her face. Then, had someone switched places with the Miko at that time? But that would have been strange too. The Miko's purpose was to dance at the festival. It didn't make sense for someone else to do it when the Miko was present. But, on the other hand, if that wasn't the case, it still didn't make sense. The more he thought about the theory that Satsuki was the Miko, the further it fell apart. But that was all he could think. Satsuki had been the Miko, and someone else had offered the dance. If that was the case, then who had danced? He couldn't tell very well on the stage, but the dancing figure had seemed of a like stature to Satsuki. If so, then it couldn't have been a man. Satsuki's height, Yu and Nanako were tall for women, and Yuka was too short. Now that he thought about it, Nanako wasn't at the festival that day. Did that fact carry any significance? As for the other people it could have been, those who knew the dance, Saya was the only person he knew of. She had always offered the dance as the Miko's representative. She would definitely have been able to fill in for her. But she had been on stage with the Miko during the offering playing the flute. It was impossible for her to have filled in that day. Saya's sister, Kensei's wife Mia, had been on stage as well, guiding the Miko. She wouldn't have been able to fill in either. What about Yoshimitsu's wife, Ryoko? He honestly didn't know. He hadn't seen her during the festival, and she wasn't the type to leave the house very often, at any rate. She was Aito's great aunt, who had married into the Shigusa family from the Hinagami family. Aito-sama, please sit up so I can change your bandages. Okay. He sat up and crossed his legs on the futon at Yuka's prompt. Please excuse me. Yuka reached around Ayato's stomach and started unwrapping his bandages. Hey, Yuka-san. Yes? Yuka responded without pause in her task. The Miko hasn't appeared at the festival since that incident, right? Yuka's hand stopped. Right, that's what I've heard. We don't see the Miko except at the festival. I wonder what she does other than that. Hard to say. She's a messenger of the gods, so I hadn't thought about it. That was probably common sense among the people of Hitogata. What the fuck? Yuka! Oh, young miss. What is this improper... undressing him on top of the futon like this? What did she think she was doing? Karen, she's just cleaning my back. I know, but it's imprudent. Karen grabbed Yuka's arm and pulled her up. I said I would take care of my brother, did I not? I'm terribly sorry, but you seem busy with your dance practice, young miss, so I... Whatever, just come here. Karen pulled Yuka out of the room. His bandages were half wrapped. Cold air from the hallway blew in from the open door. Bending forward and closing the door, he rewrapped his own bandages and lay down on the futon. He stared at his hands for no particular reason. His skin was darkened from the sun and the dirt of the jungle. His fingers were thin from hunger and thirst. He wondered how long it would take for them to return to normal. He thought about the parts missing from Satsuki's body. She had lost her limbs. What could that have meant? It was different from the curse. The Miko, messenger of Hina-sama, would never be cursed. Was it necessary for the culprit to have taken her arms and legs? What reason could there have been for that? The police had been identifying people with their fingerprints since the Meiji era. Were Satsuki's limbs severed to prevent her fingerprints from being taken? That seemed like flimsy reasoning, though. The corpse had immediately been identified as Satsuki, and no one knew where she was from anyway, so her fingerprints would have been useless. And if they didn't want her fingerprints taken, all they had to do was sever her fingers. Satsuki's arms may have been slender, but that would have been far more efficient. I don't get it. There must have been some reason, but Ayato had no idea what it could be.